Okay, it is Monday, the 19th, and it's a delayed Watchdog Wire weekly report because I didn't have time to do it on Saturday morning. So I'm going to run through some things that I covered in this past week and what's kind of coming up. A lot of stuff. I was traveling this week and I thought I didn't really cover that much, but then I go look at, oh, I actually covered a lot of little things. But before I get rolling, what I want to do is go out and play a video clip of Martin Luther King that I post every year at the same time. It's my favorite Martin Luther King clip. And let's play it and listen to it. It's very short.
On the other hand, I must be honest enough to say that I do feel that there are two types of laws. One is a just law and one is an unjust law. I think we all have moral obligations to obey just laws. On the other hand, I think we have moral obligations to disobey unjust laws because non-cooperation with evil is as much a moral obligation as is cooperation with good. I think the distinction here is that when one breaks a law that conscience tells him is unjust, he must do it openly, he must do it cheerfully, he must do it lovingly, he must do it civilly, not uncivilly, and he must do it with a willingness to accept the penalty. And any man who breaks a law that conscience tells him is unjust and willingly accepts the penalty by staying in jail in order to arouse the conscience of the community on the injustice of the law is at that moment expressing the very highest respect for law. On the other hand, I must be honest.
All right, so I love that comment because it has to do with what I would call ethical civil disobedience, and we're in a time where there's all sorts of rabble rousing on all sides that takes place, but maybe not with the understanding that if you're going to participate in any sort of civil disobedience, a key part of that is nonviolence and being willing to pay the price. So this is Martin Luther King Day, and so that's what, like I said, that's one of my favorite clips of Martin Luther King because I think it really resonates. And one time I heard somebody talk about the history of our country and us versus other people. So one of the things they said was, see if I can remember it, is, for example, that our founding fathers had to fight a war in the winter with no shoes. Our grandfathers had to jump out of landing craft in a foreign country that they knew nothing about in the face of machine gun fire. Martin Luther King Jr. had to sit in jail to over an issue that raised consciousness of something that everybody in their hearts knew was wrong. And we are called to much less. I mean, we're not jumping out of landing craft. We're not fighting a war with no shoes. You know, we're not fighting a civil war to give to live the promise of all men are created equal. We're not having those kind of challenges, and so we have to, I think, kind of honor Martin Luther King and other people that have been about how do you fight back against systems that have corruption in them in a nonviolent manner. And those are the people that we put on a pedestal, and Martin Luther King is one of them. Okay, so let's talk about what I have to cover today. And I'm going to put up on the screen some of the things that I covered in the, you can't read it, but I'm going to put up on the screen some of the things that I want to cover. And there's really 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 quick things. I'm going to try to be quick. I have I know I have another call at 10, so I know I need to be done. I need to go, can't go more than that. So Milford, in the ongoing situation in Milford, Brown County and the secrecy in Brown County and Mount Orab, Claremont County GOP and the secrecy around that, and my upcoming Gaffin interview on Wednesday, finally, and Joe Dill's divorce, a trustee in Union Township that has, I think, great public interest across the region because of the stuff that's been involved. Lemanuel Scales, again, a quick update and more coming on that. And then my visit to Larry Householder's former house in Florida. And so I'm going to try to hit, and I have a list, by the way, and I'll hold it up here, of like 10 different things that I have stuff in the can. I have stuff I recorded last week that I have not put out because I just don't have the time to edit all of it right now. I'm so busy with a variety of different things. So let's talk about Milford. And I'm gonna click into, you know, one of the things that I did about Milford, which was go to their meeting. That was their where Aaron Zupka was not terminated per se, but he was put on leave without pay, and the process of termination has begun, where he could request a hearing. So that is one, Milford thing that is going on. You can go watch that video. I'll put the links to the videos that I talk about today in the notes for this meeting, for this call, for this stream, so you can go look at them. But this Milford thing, just as a commentary on it, and there's a couple things. It's crazy. I mean, it is. There's lawsuits. So you got the Babinecks suing me. You got Tony Brothers suing. Well, the Babinecks suing me and 6 other people. You got Tony Brothers suing me and Courtney Walls. These are both the 2 people that were suspects of investigations where there had been allegations made around them. And you have all of this stuff going on. You have Aaron Zupka supposedly, based on allegations being made by the school board, routing money improperly, taking money. It just goes. And then there was the incident with 2 people with 2 incidents that it was actually 2 incidents, but I think 1 police report in the high school this past week involving adults. And it just goes, which I'll click on this one because I talked about it. And then there was an announcement of, I think, a teacher or a staff member departing. But it's kind of like, I would put some of this in the spirit of go woke, go broke. Is that when you go down a path in a high school where you have, all these crazy things going on, 2 queens, all this, then, at some point it starts to catch up with you. But my key insights on all of this associated with Milford is, I'm glad I went to private school. So I don't know how my big takeaways in the whole thing is, I don't know how people are throwing lawsuits all around when the press coverage goes on around this stuff. And there's so much going on in board meetings, et cetera, around Milford schools. I don't know why the people involved don't just do interviews, and not WXIX staged interviews, but real interviews. I don't know why there's not massive turnover in the coaching regimen at Milford. All those coaches that signed a letter defending Aaron Zupka without knowing what the hell they were talking about, and use kids as props, trying to get the kids all whipped up. It's just crazy. It is crazy. And I'm glad to keep covering it. And I'm glad obviously I don't want to be involved in things I don't need to be involved in, but the longer, like, say, litigation stuff like that goes on, or these hearings, if Zupka, I hope Zupka does a hearing on his termination, because then that would be super interesting. But the longer it goes on, I think more will come out, and I don't know where it'll lead. There are, like I said, there are allegations. One of the things that most struck me that I did a post on is that the Enquirer had done a piece where they talked about, how did they word it exactly? Something like, pictures of coaches involved in sexual relations with students, I was like, I contacted the reporter. That's one of the videos I put out there that's in the link list I'll put out, saying, like, where'd you get this from? Because I've never heard that allegation. And then they pointed it to me in the Ennis Britton report. And it's like, whoa, I must have skipped past that, because it was never an allegation that I heard from Courtney Walls or anybody. So it's just crazy, the stuff that's going on there, the drama. I don't know how you have a successful environment. And I get a lot of stuff. I have a whole stack here I get a lot of things telling me, things I need to look into. And I got stuff on West Claremont, Goshen, other places. I just don't have the bandwidth to deal with all these things. But, it's these educational environments are just very concerning, where all this stuff keeps going on. I'm going to keep covering it to the best that I can, because I think that's how we're going to get ultimately to the truth on these things. Okay. The second thing is Brown County secrecy. So I put out a update report yesterday that I'll click into here on Brown County and what's going on in Brown County. trying to get, so far, none of the councilmen that I tried to visit their houses to see if they would talk to me about their non-disclosure agreements. None of them have called me back. They all have my number. I gave them cards with my number. The mayor has not called me back. I haven't heard any concrete information on what is going on with the meeting on Tuesday. Obviously, that building can't hold everybody. I got information vis-a-vis. I didn't directly talk to him, but the one Eric Lang, the one councilman that councilman had asked the mayor to move the meeting to a bigger location, and the mayor refused. I hear it's going to be outdoors in the park. It's all crazy. It is crazy. And it just goes to show you what's happened with government service. I mean, you have 4 people get elected to a council and they immediately sign a non-disclosure agreement about stuff they don't even know about. It's like immediately, I'm part of the club. I am part of the club. So I don't. Now, I appreciate that Eric Lang recanted his non-disclosure agreement. They all should do it. And they should make sure that a quorum has not ascended to the non-disclosure agreement. One of the most disturbing things about it is there's an individual in particular that keeps, not just to me, but to like everybody, making threats online. You're going to menacing type threats, and there's no place for that. And they then claim that the mayor supports them and law enforcement supports them. And I don't know what's true or what's not true, or somebody blowharding, but where is the mayor? Where is this mayor? Go online, put out a statement about all this, okay? Where is the mayor? It's pretty simple. Where is the mayor? Where are the elected officials? And I think the mayor's got a lot to answer for. My thing on this right now is about the transparency, or the lack of transparency. And I think that the mayor's got a lot to answer for, because I don't know how you are the mayor and the appointing authority for your Port Authority, and you're also the executive director of the Port Authority. That seems like a brazen conflict of interest. And I don't know what happens to these people. I can guarantee you that when, these local officials, and this is not Mount Orab specific, but when they go quiet, like, they do secret shit, it doesn't work in your favor in many ways. One is it's generally not good. But the other part of it is these guys get rolled by people like developers and other people. And I wonder, though, however, before I move on here, I wonder, had somebody wanted to do a huge housing development on that same land, okay? So that one neighborhood, Beacon Hill or something, like abuts it on one side. Had somebody wanted to do a housing development there, how many hearings would there have been in public? There would have been a ton. There would have been a ton. But you see how it works when, in my report, I talk about Governor DeWine having an announcement on December 16th, Jobs Ohio, which is super secretive, being involved in this, and it just goes to show you how things work, us versus them, insiders versus outsiders. And I don't think that probably your council members in Mount Orab were some deep insiders per se on this. I do think that that they get played. They get like they feel important, and they get suckered by these things, and they sign non-disclosure. They do these things that is not in the best interest of the people. And I don't think ultimately it's in the best interest of them either. I think it ends up backfiring. And I think that we'll see where this goes. But I think it runs the risk of backfiring. Okay, let's go on to the next thing. Claremont GOP secrecy. I put out a set of interviews of that were supposed to be, I think, secretive. It's funny, they got sent out to the committee members on the Claremont GOP as being, no stipulation on secrecy. But I'm aware that these candidates that did these interviews, were told they would be secret, they would be deleted, but it just goes to show you, it's another example of these people want to be, I'll tell you, the system, and I'm going to relate it to Mount Orab. When people get involved in the political system is corrupt, okay? Now that might shock you. I'm joking. Everybody knows that, okay? But what it does is it trains people to be corrupt almost immediately, and people bow down to the corruption almost immediately. Okay, because they are, once they feel like they can be part of the club, they immediately bow down. And once they bow down, they are compromised. Even if somebody says, I'm going to come back, that I will, I'm going to be transparent later. I'm going to be transparent later. I saw an interview with Elon Musk where one time where somebody asked him, said about like, when did you start expressing your views the way you do? Because he's very outspoken. And you had to work your way up and get to a certain point where you had the position, the platform, and the power to be able to express your views like the way you do. And what Elon Musk's answer was, I've always been the same. He's like, because if I would have concealed my views on the way up, I would never express my views when I got to the top, which is the way these people are, is they get compromised. So think about this, these Claremont GOP candidates for the primary endorsement, where I think the party should have no role in primary endorsement. It's supposed to be the primary Republican voters or Democrat voters, if you're Democrat primary, making the decisions, not insiders. But they, at very day one, secrecy, secrecy, secrecy. That's the way it is in Claremont County. Unbelievable secrecy. I know it's not a secret in other places. Like I know Brown County has open endorsement meetings where anybody can attend. Claremont County has closed endorsement meetings. Brown County does them after the filing deadline. Claremont County does them before. Why does Claremont County do them before the filing deadline? Because if you don't get endorsed, you're supposed to not file to run in the primary. That's why in Claremont County, if you vote in the primaries, most offices, there's only one name on the ballot in the primary. The primary is rigged in the back room. Your vote doesn't matter. But they get compromised here. And just like at Mount Orab, day one of a new council member, first meeting, hey, sign this secrecy agreement. Okay, that's called getting compromised right from the very beginning. Okay, so that's another thing I talked about is these Claremont GOP endorsement process, and there's a whole bunch of videos out there that you can watch of these people. And I hope to interview them. They'll try to run and hide. It makes better video when they try to run and hide because you get like them running away. Politicians, the smart politicians, know how to play the game, at least to, even if they're insincere, to do interviews and talk, because when they don't, it actually, me chasing them in a parking lot trying to get them to have a comment on something is a worse look than participating in an interview up front. So I'll try to interview these people, but a lot of them will try to avoid it. A lot of them will try to avoid it because they don't care about you getting knowledge of them. They care about them getting power. It's scary when that happens. I don't know how much a Mount Orab council member gets paid, but isn't it scary to think of how much these people sell out for basically very little? They sell their souls for very little. Okay. So the next thing on my list is the Gaffin interview. So I'm going to interview Gaffin finally on Wednesday. So I've been trying to get other people like Brianna Weiskopf and Ryan Applegate and anybody that wants to talk to me in preparation for my interview with Kevin Gaffin. It's funny, I had some interchange with one of them, and they were like, you've already made up your mind. I trust you. If you follow me, you know that my mind is always ready to be open to new information. My mind is never locked into a position. I think that's one of the biggest flaws we have in our world today, is when you get so locked into a viewpoint that you can't, look at something objectively or take in new evidence. And so I'm going to interview Kevin Gaffin on Wednesday. It's going to be, I think, bizarre because they've told me that I can't record. I can't even bring in, I can send them notes that I want to have and they'll print them and give them to me. I can't bring in my own paper. And I know prisons are very tight on this kind of stuff. But so it's going to be me recalling what happened. I guarantee you, there's going to be advantages to probably it not being recorded because I'm going to be very blunt with Kevin Gaffin. And I've gone through the trial infinitum. I've got probably 20 pages of notes relating to the trial. And I'm looking forward to the interview, and we'll see where I go. I have kind of an opinion of the whole thing based on where I am now with the trial and everything. Having followed the trial, but I want to talk to Kevin Gaffin, look him in the eye, ask him some very tough questions, and see where we end up on it. See where we end up on Kevin Gaffin. So that is on Wednesday, the Kevin Gaffin interview. Other thing I covered is Joe Dill's divorce. So if you're not from, I live in Union Township, Claremont County, and which is 57,000 people. And Joe Dales is like a caricature. And this is his wife. They got divorced. And I say good for her. I'm going to run through. So Joe Dales and Nakia Dales are now officially divorced. She put out a video yesterday that I'm going to put at the end of this.
Come with me today as I get a divorce.
And I say good for her. I'm going to run through real quick. So, Joe Dales, those of you, even if you're not from Claremont County, and even if you're not from Union Township, you probably heard of Joe Dales, because Joe Dales was the guy that was running against Gene Schmidt for state rep in 2020 during the householder tainted, bribe tainted primary. And Gene Schmidt was a willing participant in the Larry Householder operation. And Joe Dales was the guy running. And then it was that they did a dirty dossier on him where he had Ashley Madison site. And the dossier was a smear job, but there were a lot of true things in it. I mean, so when this whole thing came out of him having an Ashley Madison account and so forth, which if you don't know what Ashley Madison is, it's ostensibly, I think it's a shakedown more than anything, but ostensibly it is a site for people looking to hook up, married people looking to hook up with other married people, like an adultery site. And I think in reality, I've never been there. I don't, I think that it is actually a shakedown. Somebody told me that if you get into this thing, they make you pay to get out. And so Joe Dales was a member of it twice. And if that's true, he probably, I don't know if that's true or not, but it's kind of like, it's like basically a hook, get all horny, get in there, find out it's bullshit. And then you have to pay to get your information purged. But so this came out, and the response back then in 2020 was that, it was the devil coming after Joe. Joe's a man of Christ. He ran on this platform of being the next coming of Jesus. And his wife stood by him, Nakia, unbelievably on the radio, everywhere with Joe. And then, so, let's keep fast forwarding. You can go look at pictures of Joe from then and look at pictures of Joe now. We'll get to it in a second here. And so I got along the way very credible information on Joe Dill's the use of illegal substances or unprescribed substances to bulk up and so forth. I had a source come to me with his messages trying to procure these things, and where I did a couple of calls with that I actually recorded. So I have the backup evidence. I've never put them out, but I have the backup evidence of that on my research, which I always like to have solid, backup. And so he denied. I also had very credible information that he had a series of affairs. He denied. And when I presented basically the information, I have this information on the roids. I never had black and white records on the affairs, but I did on the roid stuff. Then he finally admitted it, but he still denied the affairs. And then his wife eventually put out a thing on some, are we dating the same guy page or something about how Joe Dales was basically knocking boots with other women. And she finally figured it out. So, and through it all, I got demonized, vilified. I'm evil. I'm like Satan. Why don't I leave him alone? And here's the thing I'll say. I was telling the truth. Okay. And the truth, it's so funny. The press is so bad that somebody who actually does investigative journalism and, tries their best to make sure to have the facts correct, which I do, I always do. And, that they then get vilified, and turns out I can't believe how people can lie. I just cannot believe how people can lie. One of the things I tell anybody, I tell my kid, I am, an open book. I don't hide anything. And my point to that is, it's a lot easier way to live. I'll tell you, it is a lot easier way to live. I don't know how these people live. How do you lie about having affairs, for example, knowing that, you did? I mean, I just don't get it. I do not get it. And I never got with Joe why he didn't just, do the Jimmy Swaggart. And if you don't know what that means, go just do the full Jimmy Swaggart and admit, and ask forgiveness. I don't know, the Ashley Madison thing, I know it's never something like this, but had it been me, okay, and when it came out, I would have just said, I'm gonna be totally honest, because it was true, okay. If it were true, I would have just come out and said, I'm gonna be totally honest. I was young, I was horny, I checked it out, and just be honest about it. And People get it. When you're young, you do stuff. Any person that tells you they didn't do anything when they were young is lying, probably. So, any event, that's the deal. That's the deal with Joe Dills. Okay. So, another thing I did this week is I put out a thing on Lemanuel Scales and giving him some advice. And so I don't think he'll take it. I don't think he can take advice. I wonder how many young people can take advice nowadays. Are they think they know it all? But basically, what I talked about is I put out another piece, and I wanted to focus in. So I think that Lemanuel Scales is actually a talented individual, and the advice that I would give is the advice that I think could apply to a lot of people. It's what I gave in that piece that I just put up on the screen. And I tell this little story, and I'm going to tell it here if you've watched that piece, but it's worth repeating. And they say you need to hear three things to remember them. And the gist is this: is that when I was a new consultant, when I worked for what was then Arthur Andersen Management Information Consulting Division, I got a review. I always got exceptionally good reviews. I was like number one, and I got a review where I wasn't number one. I was still like, wait, good review, but not perfect review. And I was pissed. I thought it was unfair. I was young. I was pissed. And I went to the partner. There was a manager that did my review, and I went to the partner bitching about my review. And he said, and it was a partner, to be honest, I won't say the name here, but I didn't really respect the partner, but he told me something that's really stuck with me for most of my life. Is he said, first thing, Chris, is the review's not changing. Okay, we're not changing the review to be a different review than what it says. The second, by the way, it was a good review. Wasn't the point. I was just I should have got the top review. I didn't get. He's like, well, the review's not changing. And he's like, and here's what I would tell you: is you're going to get a lot of reviews in your career. You're going to get a lot of. Basically, I'll apply this to Lemanuel Scales. You're going to get criticism. You're going to get feedback, and you have options. If you think that the feedback is totally invalid, then just ignore the feedback. Just ignore it, because whatever it's bringing up is never going to come up again because it's invalid. Okay. That's option one. Option two is you can embrace all the feedback and try to react to all the feedback and try to apply it and change. And you can do that. But the reality is even when you get feedback, it's usually not perfect. Okay. Parts of it, it's not perfect feedback, and every part of it you should just react to. And then he said, and in the middle, what you can do is you can look at the feedback and you can look at it from the perspective of what parts of this feedback are actually valid and are things that I could apply to my life. Okay, think about that. What parts are valid that I could apply to my life? Doesn't mean you have to accept all the feedback. But Lemanuel Scales, that you should pay for your two kids and shouldn't owe $8,000 plus on two kids, not be making fun of being a semen donor, not going on the radio station calling out the names of your baby mamas, not running around acting like you're some philanthropist when all you do is when you don't account for your philanthropy. That's all advice you should take to heart. Okay. There is nothing wrong with that advice. And now let's see if they'll do a stream tonight about how I'm racist. Okay. Because he doesn't have any answers, and he's a hothead, and he has no wise counsel in his life. Lemanuel Scales needs somebody like me, not some sycophant idiot that follows him. And I'm sorry if you're a sycophant idiot that follows him, but a lot of you are sycophant idiots. I see young women defending a guy who doesn't pay his child support. That's disgusting. That is disgusting. Okay, so that was the advice I gave to Lemanuel Scales this week. Now, let's see and the last thing that I have is what I wanted to talk about, and then I'm going to look at comments. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's coming up, is the Larry Householder. I actually have some other video, Neil Clark. I have different things that in Florida. So Larry Householder had a house in Florida, and that house was in this neighborhood called Berkshire Lakes, and something on the order of $130,000 got spent on that house of bribe money from the Larry Householder bribe scheme. And whatever happened? Did it ever he sold the house while he was in trial. It was long after he was arrested. But he sold the house, and probably all the money got spent on his legal fees. But bribe money fixed up this house to the tune of $130,000. This house should have been sort of prevented from being sold for restitution for the government. But I don't know. A lot of times when these people, these people, even in political stuff, when they get got, they still kind of get a better deal than the average person would get. They still get a better deal than the average person would get. And I don't know how restitution was handled on this house. This is video from 2020 that's playing right now, because I went there in 2020 and it was crazy. The neighbor came over and had keys and took me through the house, and it was very interesting in there. But just so you know, Larry Householder, obviously a lot of Ohio people have places in Florida and the kind of Fort Myers, Naples, those kind of areas are very popular places. But Larry Householder had this house where that roof that got put on there got put on with bribe money from First Energy, and I have no idea what the closure around the pool allegedly got done with bribe money from because it had been damaged in a hurricane or something, and it got redone with bribe money. So that's I did a thing on that. I'm going to have a thing on Neil Clark. Like I said, I got a whole bunch of stuff that I've already recorded that I have not actually even put out. All right, so let's come back to what's coming up this week, and what I'm going to be focusing on in the next couple of days. I got a lot of stuff I got to do today. No holiday for Chris. I have a lot of stuff I got to get done today. But so I have there's a court hearing on November 2 tomorrow at 11 a.m. in Victor Haddad's court in Claremont County as part of the Babineck trial. So I got to do that tomorrow. The Mount Orb meeting is tomorrow night. I don't know where it is. I'd love this if they move it to if they keep it in that little building where people can't get in, that's going to be crazy. If they do it outside in the freezing cold, that's going to be crazier. It's like I used to describe Claremont County as remember the TV show House of Cards on Netflix or what have you? And I used to call it Hillbilly House of Cards. And maybe our whole region I could call Hillbilly House of Cards. Why don't you just make an arrangement? I'm sure there's like a school, that you could do this meeting at and have more room for people and show some respect for your citizens. It's disrespectful that this wasn't already addressed, the precision as to where the meeting location is for this Mount Orb meeting. But that's coming up on Tuesday, okay? Gaffin interview on Wednesday. There's also a Claremont GOP meeting on Wednesday night. And, and then I got to come through I apologize to people. There's a lot of stuff I get. I just don't have time. And it's sitting on my desk piled up here to go through it. I guarantee I work harder. I spend more hours working now, I think, than when I was working as a consultant. And because I'm really passionate about this stuff, I'm really passionate about us getting clean government. And a key thing that the founders intended for clean government is a vibrant press that is asking the tough questions and uses shoe leather journalism. Okay, it's funny, like it's funny people say I don't think I actually dox anybody, but it's like, okay, these elected officials. Why don't elected officials do what I'm doing right now? Why don't they do weekly updates? Why aren't they transparent with you? Why don't they do this? What happened? How has our system got so effed up the way it is? I'm going to say something it's a little bit controversial, but, I heard about this guy, if you've never heard of him, Andrew Tate. Okay. And Andrew Tate is an instigator, and he is a very controversial figure, and you can go research him. But when I hear about controversial figures, I try to actually listen to them some to see what they're saying. Okay, see what they're actually saying myself, because you can't trust reporting. Well, Andrew Tate one time talked about how the Western civilization, we tell young people that democracy, republics, it's the best form of government, by far best form of government. But you go to the United Arab Emirates, for example, in the Emir, a totalitarian government, maybe a benefit, what do they call it? Not strict, not harsh, okay, but it is. It's a Muslim country, but it's not totalitarian like Hitler. But the Emir has a weekly meeting where people can come in and bitch about whatever they want to bitch about. And if somebody comes in and says there's a pothole on my street, the pothole gets fixed in a day. And it's true. I've been to the United Arab Emirates again and again and again. And he's like, but we're telling our kids and young people that our form of democracy is the best form of government, but it cannot fix their everyday problems. It can't fix the pothole in the street. It can't be transparent with them. We tell them that open government of, for, by the people is what's important, but then we have people signing NDAs to hide things from the citizens. And then we say like, well, the United Arab Emirates is a benevolent dictatorship and it's wrong and you should hate it. China is terrible and you should hate it, but they can do unbelievable projects in China. So we have really disgraced, and these politicians in office, I think in many ways, have disgraced the form of government that is the best form of government. They've turned it into something else. They've turned it into a situation where you have a mayor in a small town who won't respect his people enough to proactively get a proper place for a meeting. You get a mayor signing NDAs about data centers, likely Amazon data centers, who doesn't live stream his own meetings. Okay. You get commissioners, and Barry Woodruff, I know you from the Work Act thing, and I'm looking right at you, Barry Woodruff, Brown County commissioners, putting out statements and responding to me that their secrecy doesn't violate your First Amendment rights. Bullshit. And just so everybody knows this, is your your First Amendment right is you have the right to redress grievances to government. Part of that means you have the right to access government. Why? Because if government did everything in secret, how can you redress grievances for stuff they do in secret? You can't. You have to know what your government's doing in order to have your First Amendment rights. So Barry Woodruff, bullshit. I don't know that I can't remember all the names of the commissioners in Brown County, but this statement, these statements about the First Amendment, just admit you did wrong. That's another thing about the political class. They can never just admit I fucked up and did wrong. They can't do it. They won't do it. They have to double down. They just can't resist doubling down. They are totally disconnected. I like that. I'm going to wrap up here. Look at the comments and then wrap up. But another provocateur, I can't watch the guy because he's too fast paced and it fries my brain, but Russell Brand, he likes to remind people that we have more in common with each other than any of us do with the people that claim to be our leaders. Think about that for a second. And if we ever figure that out, our leaders are toast. We have more in common with each other than we do with the people who claim to be our leaders. Okay. All right. So let's see what we got on the comments here. And not a lot. There's not a lot here. So, okay. I don't know what this means. Okay. Please check. That's what they're using. NDA. Well, I'm going to, I don't know. This NDA stuff, I don't think a elected official can sign. There's places where the government, every place where the government is allowed to be secret, it's because the beneficence of the public to allow them to be secret. Okay. So when they have executive session, they can do it on things that we, the citizens, through our legislature, have allowed them to do in secret, like personnel matters. Okay. And they're common sense things. Okay. And, so they can do certain executive session things. That's different than an NDA. And there are these bodies, port authorities and CICs that can do extra secret things that are statutory things. But you also, when you start having that the mayor is the executive director of the Port Authority while also being part of the body that appoints people to the Port Authority, that's a conflict of interest. And remember, there was a time, like when I was a kid, when people would say, we should be avoiding the appearance of impropriety. The appearance of impropriety. I'm going to say something else controversial here, maybe. When I was a kid, I'm 60. Whenever there was prayer, when there was prayer in public places, which I'm all for, it was always non-denominational. Okay? It wasn't Jesus this, Jesus that. It was non-denominational. Why? Because people respected that every faith has the concept of a higher power, and we can have non-denominational prayer to God, okay, that is respectful to everybody. Now, when we have prayers before meetings, it's all Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. I'm all for Jesus. I'm a Christian. But I sit there thinking, does a Hindu like this? Does a Muslim like this? Or should we be non-denominational? But at the time that they were doing the non-denominational prayers when I was a kid, we had much stronger faith communities. Think about that. We've actually gone the wrong direction. What it's become is a lot more of the stuff that's become window dressing than real faith and real commitment to things. And we see it across our government in the secrecy. I don't think that elected officials can sign NDAs. Legally, but I think spiritually, ethically, it's wrong, and it looks like they do it all the time. If they want to do things in a secretive manner, they do it through the Port Authority of the CIC or limited things that can be done in executive session. Remember, David Ubel, ex-county commissioner in Claremont County, used the Convention and Visitors Bureau as a way to do things in secret without disclosing it to the public. And it's just disgusting. These people have bastardized the greatest system of government we could ever imagine into that don't get it. They don't even understand what they're doing. Okay. Let's see what else we got here. James, I don't think you really know. I'm not saying I'm an expert, but I like to comment, and I don't mean this with disrespect. Okay, is we all become lawyers. Okay, we all become lawyers. Okay, and I'm not a lawyer, and I don't, purport to be. And but I have been around the block a lot. I've been around the block in a lot of quasi-judicial hearings. I've been around the block a lot with these things and what passes muster and doesn't. And Robin here, can't believe how easily people lie. I can't believe it either. I can't, especially in lies where it's easy to get caught. Okay, that you can get get caught. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to comment on this one. John Guffey, you don't get the government you want, you get the government you deserve. Okay. And the reality is our government doesn't lead us, it reflects us. So I'm going to hit some hard facts. Are a significant percentage of our population lying sacks of shit? Yes. Okay. And our government, it becomes that. So think about how our federal government operates. A lot of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, charge things on credit cards they can't really afford, build up debt. Okay. What does our federal government do? It reflects the people, a people that wants things that they can't afford. Okay. And to hell with the future. We talk about our kids. We don't want to saddle our kids, but to hell with it. I want now. And by the way, what pains me the most with this, there's that guy, I didn't do a Claremont Sun thing for today, but there's that guy that does the articles every week in the Claremont Sun. And I look at it and say, on the veteran stuff, and it's like, okay, I get it. I'm all for veterans, but do you realize everything you're demanding is stuff that is going to, we don't have the money for all this stuff. Just at some point, we don't have the money. You're going to have to let up. Everybody can't have everything. I don't know, what is a Amazon data center? So AWS, okay, Amazon Cloud Services. Anybody should know this. That remember when Parler went away or sometimes now when AWS goes out, Amazon Web Services, a lot of the major websites in the world go down because it's a cloud hosting facility, and you have AI stuff, you have this unbelievable thing. So I jokingly say to people, I don't jokingly say this, we need these data centers because it's part of the surveillance state. So AWS is one of the biggest federal government contractors for this kind of stuff. And where do you think the flock camera pictures get stored? Where do you think this gets stored? Where do you think that gets stored? Where do you think all your telecommunications records under the Patriot Act get stored? Okay. Amazon is one of the biggest providers of these services. What they're building in your backyard is the method by which you are surveilled. Okay. It's a lot of other things too. Okay. But it is, you have to understand that these things, Amazon is in the category of one of them that I would be more suspicious of. Okay. Because of the fact that they have such a prevalent government relationship on monitoring in the surveillance state. And so it's funny, you look at that building and you say flock cameras. The one thing that's funny is I do have a meeting at 10, but so when I was driving around Mount Orab on Saturday, I noticed Amazon trucks. I think I saw 3 or 4 Amazon trucks. And think about how we operate as a society is we have a is we don't like China, but we buy all our stuff from China. Okay. We don't want the Amazon data center, but we have Amazon trucks delivering stuff to us. Right. We are I heard a comedian once talking about people taking the vax. Okay. And she's Leonardo Joni. She's hilarious. Listen to this comic. And she's like, so our founding fathers were fighting for this and this, and we were fighting for wear masks so I can have banana pancakes on Sunday at brunch. As we are so, willing to sacrifice our values. And funny, by the way, I think not all hope is lost, though. I think it's funny that the places that are going to lead the way forward in terms of freedom are not going to be the United States. Isn't it funny to think about that Elon Musk is the most prominent, you can like him or hate him, but he is the most prominent, outspoken business person on we got to quit spending like drunken sailors. We got to protect the First Amendment. And he's not even a native born American. Where are all of our American businessmen? Where's a single American businessman who's fighting the way Elon Musk is? Who's willing to put his, he bought Twitter just because he thought we were going to be gone into a sea of wokeism if somebody didn't buy it and not allow it to be screening out opinions that were not acceptable to the surveillance state. So where are our American businessmen? Where's our Mount Ora businessmen fighting for this? Where are they? Where are they? They are, we live in we are not, unfortunately, we are not too often, those words, when you sing them, land of the free, home of the brave. Okay. Land of the free, home of the brave. What's happened? I think that other people, though, will embrace that more than we will. Okay. So I got to go quick here. I have no update on the Somali rep. Somebody sent me a set of info I haven't even looked at about the Somali rep, the woman Somali rep. Somebody told me that Scales removed sperm donor as being his job. That's what he listed his job as. Proud father. Your 13-year-old kid can go out and say, my dad's job says sperm donor. And he doesn't pay my child support, but he claims to be a great dad. Okay. And he would pay money. Just the baby mama should just call him and say the kid beg him. He doesn't pay his money, but she should belittle herself and beg Lemanuel Scales to give her some money to get him some shoes. That's what he said in court. Okay. It's disgusting. So I don't know. Somebody told me he removed it, and then I went and checked and he hadn't. So I can't confirm this. Okay. Let's see. I'm just going to put this up. I don't know what these are. Biggest data centers. Okay. Obviously, if you don't understand that where people make their money, it's kind of like we're on social media right now. You don't pay for this. Where do you think they're making their money? Where do you think they're making their money? You get this? Like, why is it that they can give you all this stuff for free? Why can Google give everybody in America free email? Why would you have your email on Google? Why would you do that? That's another good example. We don't like the surveillance state. Google's evil, but we all have Google email addresses. We don't like Microsoft, but we have Hotmail email addresses. Why? Just look at how unwilling, what a disgrace we are on a lot of things in terms of what our founding fathers would have believed, how complacent we've become with these things. All right. And okay, I think that's it for the comments I'm going to comment on. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. I'll try to be back on Saturday next week. But I was busy this Saturday. Have a great holiday in Martin Luther King Day. And hopefully this update is informative. And I will put the links, at least the ones that some of my clicked in, I will put in the description for this so that if you watch this after the fact, you can go read or look at the things that I talked about. Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of the day.